Okay, thank you for the awesome introduction, Allison. So yes, our topic for this session is standard operating procedures, right? So what do you say about standard operating procedures to make it sound like a really engaging topic? But it actually is. We consult with hundreds of companies all around the country, some of them even in other countries, and SOPs are something that's as old as the company itself, right? Every company has policies and procedures, but they're not always well documented. Sometimes they're kind of just tribal knowledge kinds of things, and even the big ones struggle to get it right. So a lot of times we spend a lot of time helping organizations better create, manage, track, and improve these on an ongoing basis. So we're going to talk about how to use the Microsoft stack of solutions to help you do this better, with a lot of special emphasis on SharePoint and Microsoft 365. So this is something that happens to us very typically. And if you've ever spent any time trying to develop a process, trying to talk to people about how do you do your job so I can help you do it better, this is something you've probably run into yourself. And that is, you say, what's our standard operating procedure for a process? And you ask someone, and they tell you, here's how I do it. And then you ask someone else who might even have the same title and job description, and you start realizing you've got a lot of different answers. In fact, sometimes for some processes, the process is truly just in somebody's mind. It's whatever they've decided to do, whatever they've learned over time. Maybe they did shortcuts around a system years ago that they're still doing, even though that shortcut isn't even required anymore, right? So now I trust the person who gave me the flow chart, not the person who just spoke it. I think that person's more detailed, but that's no guarantee that they're right. So this is typical, right? Everyone's got their own way of doing things. And how do you get unified around this? Because if as a company, you're not doing things in the same way, you can't improve them, right? If you've got a problem with this process, whatever this one is, and you want to improve that process, how do you improve a process when you don't really have a process? Everyone's got their own process. But if they're all on the same page, if everyone's rowing in the same direction, then you can find the best version of that process to work efficiently, productively, with a high degree of customer and employee satisfaction. So that's what we're after today. Allison already introduced me, but again, my name is Jeff Abels. I run C5 Insight. I've been doing that for about 22 years now. And we are all about people-centric business, right? How do we help our clients be more centered on customers and more centered on employees, helping them to communicate better and run their businesses more effectively and efficiently and in a more people-centric format. So I geek out on this stuff. I write about it. I talk about it. Somehow I was on Impractical Jokers too. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, which basically just means that Microsoft has recognized me as doing a lot of the kind of stuff I'm doing today, kind of helping the community learn more. But on the right-hand side is all the important stuff. That's my why, right? So there's my whole family there with 3 generations, my wife and I, our daughters, their husbands, and our 2 grandkids. And somewhere in there's a dog, or maybe right below it's the only picture of the dog. My wife, June, and I love riding a motorcycle whenever we can. Love to connect with people who like to ride. In fact, in about 2 weeks, I'll be riding from Charlotte, North Carolina, all the way down in Galveston, Texas. So if you're anywhere along that route, I'd love to stop by and say hi. We also enjoy fine spirits, bourbon and wine in particular, but many others as well. So that's a little bit about me. Hopefully I can get to know you better too. Okay, so our agenda for this is we'll do a quick introduction to the topic overall. Then we're going to look at what the options are, because there are actually a lot of ways you can track your standard operating procedures with the Microsoft stack. And there's not one that's best. We've kind of found some that work better than others by and large, but I at least want you to understand the landscape before I go into a visionary demo of how you can manage your SOPs in an SOP library with Microsoft 365. Time permitting, I get a little bit of bonus content at the end of the session too. You'll notice little orange flyouts throughout today's session. Those are clickable links. If you'd like to get copies of those, I'll put my contact information on the last slide. Just ping me and ask for them. I will give you the entire slide deck in PDF format. Those orange flyouts will still be hot links. You can click to play videos or download things or whatever it is that I've got for you in the slide deck today. Okay, so quick introduction to SOPs in general. I know this sounds a little bit odd, but I felt like I needed to talk about what even are standard operating procedures, because there's actually a lot of different definitions for them. So in a people-centric organization, and really every organization should be people-centric, you can evaluate your SOPs this way. If you remember my opening slide, listening is part of the process, right? So how do you understand what works best? So listen to the team, right? SOPs is not something that one person does, but you listen to each other, understand the people and how they work. My opening slide, I talked to a bunch of different people to understand the process, even though there's 4 different shades of whatever the process is. I had to listen to those people to really understand it. I also, by the way, have to listen to the business. Right? What are the most important processes? How does this need to work? Listen to the customers. How do they want to engage with us if this is a customer-centered process? Then you understand, right? Then you take the time to go, okay, let me break this down, put on my business analyst hat and say, which one of these are working best for the organization as a starting point? And then you can connect, right? Then you can say, now I'm going to document the one-size-fits-all process, and don't worry too much about the outliers, but there's this exception, there's that exception. When you're worrying about standard operating procedures, you're thinking 80 to 95% of the cases, here's how it works. If you've got some outliers, come back to those a little bit later. Focus on the things that are very consistent. So connecting is the process step. Now you're connecting what you've learned with the solution, with what the SOP is. And finally, you want to know what the results are. So you don't just set it up and go, there it is, everybody go have a good day, do the new SOP. You want to have metrics so you can monitor that SOP to say, when this isn't working, we need to be able to identify that, raise it as an issue, and someone can own coming back and improving it. So that's knowing the results so you can continuously improve. So listen, understand, connect, and know. That's our formula for being powered by luck, for understanding, defining, and improving your standard operating procedures on an ongoing basis. And when it comes to Microsoft 365, there is a lot under the hood. A lot of people approach us saying something like, we want help with SharePoint, we want help with Teams. That's great, but that's almost predefining, we think this is the solution in here to do what we need it to do. But sometimes it's somewhere else. So understand you have got a very big toolbox when it comes to Microsoft 365. So avail yourself of the right tool that's the best fit for you. In the demo videos I'll play for you, you may hear a couple of names I want you to be introduced to. The first one is Contoso. That's an imaginary organization. I like to say it's the world's largest imaginary company. It was actually invented by Microsoft, and we're just piggybacking on that as a Microsoft partner. Allie Jameson is an imaginary person invented by C5 Insight, and she is an employee of Contoso. So you might hear some things about Allie's trying to do this or that for Contoso. You'll know what I mean when you hear those things. It just makes the demos a little more human and approachable. All right, so let's just look at some options before we walk into sort of a visionary demo of SOPs working in your shop. As you think about SOPs, there are a lot of ways you can approach them as an organization. There is no one right way, depending on the size, complexity, culture of your organization, geographic distribution, all those things can play a role. But here's the different models in general. First of all, there's the decentralized model. It's kind of like everybody owns their own SOPs, right? Maybe each department does. Maybe you're really small and you've got some departments that are just a one-person department and they need to own their own SOPs, right? In general, the smaller you are, the more that will be kind of written in someone's head instead of down on paper, but you want to get them more on paper as time goes by. Then there's the opposite extreme. There's a completely centralized, right? We have an SOP office. They manage the library of SOPs. They help to define all the SOPs, and they are the ultimate owner of standard operating procedures everywhere within the organization. And my computer seems to have frozen. Oh, you know what happened? I think my mouse battery just died. I forgot. I got the alert on that. Need an SOP about replacing my mouse battery. Okay, I'll switch to my trackpad. The third one is collaborative. So this is the idea of people are working together, right? There's more of a shared ownership, cross-functional committee. So you might have an SOP committee that brings in people from multiple different departments. They work together on defining the SOPs. And then the last one is what I call hybrid, right? Where you're bringing all the best components of each one of those things in. Again, there is no one size fits all here. You need to understand you and your organization to decide what the best approach is going to be for you. And as your organization grows and changes, this might grow and change over time as well. So those are the models. Now let's talk about the Microsoft 365 applications. So I'm going to call this file types, right? Because ultimately your standard operating procedures are a set of documents, right? Now when you hear the word documents, sometimes that gives you a foregone conclusion. So let's just say digital assets or content or something like that, right? But somehow they are documented. It's not a process if it's not in writing, right? If it's only in someone's head, we're going to say that that doesn't count as an SOP until we've actually got it down in writing. So within that, we kind of did this comparison matrix, and you can kind of see like, poor to best ratings for each one of these categories. I won't go through each one of these. You can read this on your own. But the types overall are printed, right? That's very old school, but you'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, at how many of our clients still have 3-ring binders full of SOPs, and people have to go to some reference library somewhere to get those. So it's worked up until recently for everybody. Now we can finally be more digital, and of course, we're talking Microsoft 365. We're very big advocates for having them in digital format. There's also something in Microsoft Teams called a wiki, or actually there was until about a month ago. We were never big fans of using the Teams wiki for a lot of reasons, and you can kind of see those documented here. Microsoft also decided they weren't fans anymore either. They've discontinued wikis and Teams. If you happen to already be using Teams wikis, there is good news. There's some migration path for getting those to Microsoft's preferred choice, which is now OneNote. But understand you won't be able to create those inside of a Teams wiki anymore. Then there's OneNote. OneNote is great in that it's super flexible, right? Anybody can get in there. You can format things however you want. It's easy to open a page and start typing and getting things into it. On the other hand, not so good for security and version management and controlling approvals and all of those kinds of things. But for a small organization, it may be perfectly fine. Then there's the good old document, right? Usually Microsoft Word, but maybe you've got some things in PowerPoint and that kind of stuff as well. So there's that document, right? And that's stored maybe in a document library. The last one is a SharePoint page, which a lot of people don't quite even know what that is, or even that that's an option. So in SharePoint, yes, you have this idea of pages, but if you're using SharePoint, you probably also are using the news feed in it, right? You can create new news articles in it. Whenever you create a new piece of news, that's actually a SharePoint page. Those SharePoint pages can be purposed for anything you want, including making those pages standard operating procedures. If you look at the little dots in there, you can see, in our view, that's probably one of the more powerful ways to manage this. What it comes down to is it does a lot of the same things documents do: good version control, good security, excellent approval processes. What it also does that's unique is that if you put this into pages, then your SOPs are web pages, meaning fewer clicks for people to go to, right? Hey, I need to know the SOP for this. Well, if your SOP is in a Word document, you get a link, you got to open that link, you got to open it in Word, you look at it, it's somewhere else, right? It's multiple clicks away for you to get to it. With a SharePoint page library, you can one click, you're on it instantly. You see the whole SOP in front of you. You can also embed other functionality into that page that you cannot easily, or maybe even possibly, embed into something like a Microsoft Word page. So we think if you're really evolving your standard operating procedures, SharePoint pages are the way to go if you're a Microsoft shop using Microsoft technologies. Not that the others can't work, and depending on where you are in the continuum, maybe another one makes more sense, but that's the option we're going to focus on today. Now, if you are more document-centric and you think, I want to get a little bit of a vision for how we can do this with documents, I'm not going to play these videos today, but here's a couple of videos we've created for you where you can very quickly see, here's how you might lay out a document library and a site for your standard operating procedures using documents to do that, and even a way to suggest new ideas for standard operating procedures using a form. So take a look at those if that's something that you're interested in. But what I want to focus on is this idea of a library of SharePoint pages as a visionary demo for how you can do standard operating procedures better than you're probably doing them today. And I'm going to do this in 4 parts. We're going to look at what is the user experience. So think of this as the consumer of the standard operating procedure, not the creator, not the administrator, not the approver, but someone who's just like, I got to go find this thing and do something with it. Here's where I go to do that. Here's how I interact with that. Then we're going to look at the administrator experience, the person who does have to go through and say, I got to own some of these SOPs, maybe not all of them. So what can I do as the admin? How does this make my life easier? What's my experience of the solution? And then we'll look at a brief use case for an approval process, because most SOPs, if you're a fairly sophisticated organization, you don't want someone doing those in a vacuum. You don't want just anybody editing them at will. You want to make sure it goes through a rigorous approval process. And yet that approval process should not interfere with whatever the SOP currently is, while you're drafting the new one, you're not overwriting something, right? People can still see the current version until you're ready to push the new version out, but you want that push to be simple and seamless without a lot of copies of documents flying all over the place. And then I'll share a little bit about how can we also integrate this into the bigger suite of Microsoft tools. So let's get ready and dive in and start with, and I'm doing my mouse again, old habits. And start by looking at the user experience. So I'm gonna show you this 2-minute video about the user experience, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it once it's played out. Let's just take a look at what this user might experience.
And standard operating procedures. Contoso recently created a SharePoint site for managing and sharing their policies and standard operating procedures. Ali is currently in SharePoint and is visiting the SOP site. She navigates to the library. She likes that the SOP library is easy to search. She can use views to sort, group, and filter the list of SOPs. For example, here she's going to change to list SOPs by owner, so she can easily find the items that she is responsible for. It's easy for Ali and her coworkers to create more views if they need them. For example, Ali wants to filter all the SOPs to show the ones that need further review. Just like that, the view is filtered to show only the requested items. Ali's going to use this view frequently, so she clicks the drop-down, chooses Save View As, and names it Items Needing Review, and saves it. Ali's going to switch back to viewing by category. She also likes that she can easily search policies in the Microsoft 365 search bar. If she enters any term found within a procedure, the search bar will find it. And with a click, Ali can be taken to the item she was searching for. Back on the SOP list, additional filters are also available. These filters are based on the data that Contoso has set up for their SOPs. They could easily add more filter types, such as filter for department if desired. SOP pages give Contoso the flexibility to include formatted text, images, and links to other documents within their SOPs. Ali and her coworkers find it much easier to work with processes and procedures in web pages than embedded within documents. Pages also allow additional functionality. As an employee of Contoso, everyone can see the acceptance widget on their SOP pages. Ali can see that the last date that she accepted this SOP and mark it as read and understood. Ali could click this button again to re-accept this document as accepted and understood with today's date. She can also see any comments that have been made regarding the SOP. This is part of creating a feedback loop so Contoso can give every employee a voice and can continuously improve their processes.
All right, so some highlights there. First of all, you saw this was in a single library. By the way, you can have multiple libraries if you want to, but this was a single SOP library. In our case, we set up a site for standard operating procedures. We set up a library within it. This library is special. It's not a document library. It's a SharePoint Pages library. We have a library there with all that. You also saw metadata, so we could slice and dice things differently. We can filter by department or by owner or by category. Whatever columns you want to set up, you can set up for your SOP library. You also saw views in there. So if you have a very long list of standard operating procedures, that might be overwhelming for someone to get into. But with views, you can say, I only want to see the ones for this department or that relate to me or that are related to this topic. And you saw search built into it as well. So think about, for example, your employee handbook. Your employee handbook is essentially a list of, largely a list of SOPs. Some of it's just policies, but some of it is SOPs. And you think about someone needs to go reference that. Well, what you probably have if you're normal is it's a PDF or a Word document somewhere out there that people have to go open that document and search within that document to find what they need. Would it be a lot easier for people if instead you had 40 different pages where you said, here's each different topic broken up very nicely and easily digestible for you? It probably would be, right? So search, views, filters allow you to do all of those things, each on separate pages. You saw the pages. Those are based on templates. We'll learn a little bit more about those in a minute, but they're very flexible, maybe not quite the same as a Word document, but they're like a web page, right? I can put text on them. I can put images on them. I can format that however I need to. I can link to other related resources if I want to. So I might say, here's our SOP for following up on a customer service issue. But here's a link to our training when using Dynamics 365 customer service when doing that, right? So you can easily bring things together in one place. You also saw on the right-hand column embedded functionality. So some of that's some secret sauce, some of it's not necessarily right out of the box, but it's some low-code modifications you can make to say, for example, I want to make sure that the owner of this policy reviews it at least once a year to make sure it's still current. And when the year elapses, they get an alert via email, and there's a little flag there saying this policy is out of compliance. People know that until that person goes and reviews it. Or I want a widget that says everybody has to state that they've reviewed this policy because it's an important piece of compliance for us. So I want people to check that off, and behind the scenes, it actually writes that to a database. So I can see Jeff Abel said that he had reviewed and accepted this in November of 2023. And so if I ever need to go back and see that, I can go, here's the last time that you did that. There's also commenting available in there as well. So that's built right into the SharePoint interface as an opportunity to do that. Okay. So let's talk admin experience now. So that last video we saw was someone consuming SOPs. Now let's talk about someone who actually has to go change an SOP, change the content of an SOP. And I want you to look at the process, because when you go through this, you'll see that this person checks it out, meaning I'm now owning this to edit, but when I check it out, I'm actually going to save the live version of it. My checked out version is different, so I can make edits to it. Does not impact the live version until I say now it's ready for publication. We'll get back to that in a minute. We'll also see versions and some other things in this quick demo.
Starts by checking Contoso's SOP. Ali administers Contoso's SOP site and is going to make some changes to a document. She starts by checking it out. This locks the document so only Ali can make changes, and it generates a new minor version number. Ali opens the document. Before she begins editing, she notes the SOP administration area. Only Ali and others with administrative access to the SOP library can see these items. Ali can see the date that the owner of this policy will need to review and confirm that it is still up to date. She can also see that only 25% of the team has marked this policy as read and understood. She clicks this button for more information. Ali can see that one person has accepted this policy, 2 are pending, and 1 person is past due. Back on the policy that she's working with, Ali clicks Page Details to check out more information on the page. From here, she can check the version history for this policy. Here she can see every version that has been drafted and published since the policy was first created. She can even highlight the differences between an older version and the current version. Ali wants to make a few changes to this policy, so she just clicks the Edit button and makes her changes. When she's done, she saves this as a draft. If Ali wanted to create a new process document, she could click the New button and choose News Post. And she could use the SOP template that Contoso created. This template gives all of their SOPs a consistent look and functionality. Back in the SOP library, Ali sees that her document was automatically checked in. Contoso has versioning set up with major and minor versions. Because Ali has administrator rights, she can see the latest minor version. But everyone else at Contoso can only see the latest major version. This allows Contoso to continue to edit and refine their SOP documentation until they're ready to make it available to everyone in the organization.
So major, minor versions, version history, what does all that mean? So the really cool thing about that, you saw that Ali was able to open something that was already kind of in production. It was a published policy. When she did that, it said, I'm going to automatically create a minor version. So what SharePoint means when it says minor version is, as the owner of this policy, Ali, you are the only person who can see this edited version. Everyone else sees the last major version. So think of it like software versions, right? So 1.0, everyone can see it. 1.1 through 1.99 and on, only the author can see that. When that person says, I'm done just saving drafts, I now want to publish this as a new version, version 2.0 is now born. Everybody can see that. And then you again begin making minor versions until you approve publishing it again. So it allows you to edit your policies and procedures in place in real time without disrupting the flow of the people who are referencing that policy to get their work done day to day. Approvals are built right into Microsoft 365. They're part of the Power Platform, Power Automate, those kinds of things. Let's look at how someone like Intoso might use approvals as another step. So they go a little bit beyond just you're the policy owner, you can edit it, to although you're the policy owner, you have to get an approval before we're going to publish it.
Versions, meaning that there are changes. Allie is ready to publish an update to an SOP. At a glance, she can see all the documents that have minor versions, meaning that there are changes that have not yet been published. She can hover over the publishing icon to see more information and can select to launch the approval process from here. Instead, Allie opens a process that she's recently edited. And from here, she can use the Submit for Approval button to begin the approval process. Behind the scenes, a workflow process is triggered that was created for Contoso. When the SOP is submitted, an initial approval is generated and sent via email to an initial person for approval. If that request is not accepted, then Allie will receive an email letter letting her know that her requested updates were not accepted. If the request is accepted, then it will go to a second round of approval with a more senior person having a final review of the SOP. If they decline it, Allie will receive a decline notification, and if they accept it, then Allie will receive the accept notification and the document will be published. Approvals come in via email. They include a link to the SOP, and they can easily be accepted or rejected with a click of a button, plus, if desired, a few comments.
So as you can see, that was a moderate level approval. It wasn't just one person. There were 2 levels in there. You can make that as sophisticated as you want. Power Automate allows you to do all of that. You can also, by the way, if you have a really simple approval, there's something called Teams approvals or Teams approval templates, where you can interactively build them without even using Power Automate. So it's something to check out if you don't need something quite as sophisticated as what we're talking about today. Now, this also integrates nicely with Microsoft 365 overall. I'm going to skip the video. You can go watch that later if you want the slides. But know that these are SharePoint pages, so they can integrate with everything across Microsoft 365. You can have them on the home page. You can say any new policy published should appear on the home page for some period of time, right alongside other news in SharePoint if you want to. You've also got in Microsoft 365 the My Content and the Feed. These are other places where things relevant to people can automatically show up. So you might label these by a department, and I'll see my new departmental SOPs as they come up in real time in multiple different places as I use a suite of applications within Microsoft 365. You can, of course, integrate them into your intranet homepage as well, and into Microsoft Teams. So remember, SharePoint is essentially the engine behind a huge part of Microsoft 365, including Teams. So lots of different ways you can expose those to people across your digital workplace. Okay, a little bit of bonus content because we do have some time here. One thing to think about is we're talking about SOPs, but what a lot of organizations are missing are an SOP for their SOPs. And I mean exactly what that sounds like. What is your process for helping you identify and define your standard operating procedures? That in and of itself should be a set of SOPs. Where do we maintain these? How do we maintain these? Who has ownership of these? On what level are we updating them? Some of them might be a little looser, so a small group of people can just own them and do what they need to. Some might be very tight, like IT security or certain finance SOPs or HR compliance SOPs. So one way to think about developing that is start with your departments. That's always a great way to start thinking about your SOPs. Each department just lists their critical ones, and we facilitate sessions like this all the time. What's our list of the standard operating procedures we need to have? Do the initial just as a list of bullet points. Don't overthink it. Keep it super simple. If you don't have any yet, or you're just starting with some departments, have a short list, right? Probably no more than 10. If you've got a longer list, prioritize it so you discipline yourself to get to the top 5 or 10. Think procedure, not step-by-step process training. This is why I kind of defined SOPs up front a little bit, because it's easy to get into, hey, in general, for this SOP, we need to make sure we create a contract, save it over here, and send it to this person for approval. That's an SOP. But a step-by-step process is, Open up Word, create the document, make sure you have the Adobe add-on installed so you can create it for e-signature, all those other steps. That's training. Have training in a separate place. That might be a little more dynamic. The general SOP in another place. Maintain an issue list. If you were with us in the last session we did, go remember that. And if you weren't, go watch that. We talked about better meetings with Microsoft 365 and Dynamics. We talked a lot about an issue list. That is a big part of SOP development. Identify problems in your issue list. A lot of those get fixed by going to your SOPs and either fixing the SOP or creating a new SOP. And build SOPs into your regular leadership staff and team meetings, right? So in your cadence of meetings, having SOPs as part of the discussion, that's a really important part of your business. If you don't have SOPs, you really don't have a business. If they're not written, your business is only your people. You want a combination of the best of both. Great processes, great people, and the technology that brings those worlds together. Another quick tip, use ChatGPT or Copilot to create some drafts for your SOPs. The cool thing about generative AI is a lot of the model behind it was actually trained on things like SOPs and legal code. So it's pretty good at a lot of things. It's scary, but one of the things it really excels at are things like SOPs. So have a conversation. Hey, we need a new SOP for, what our employee onboarding process is. Help me write what that looks like, and it can help you produce something automatically. You can see here is one that we did for password management, because we have to not just manage passwords in general, but we actually have to manage passwords because we log into our client systems all the time. So we use generative AI to help us go back and refine what our policy had been into something that was much better managed than that. There's a quick training video there for you for ChatGPT. If you've never used it, or if you've got Microsoft Copilot already, you can use that as well too. There's also the potential for advanced standard operating procedures. You can go way beyond this. I'm going to take a risk here because we actually have a governance portal that we stand up for multiple clients, but we stood it up in our own production environment as well. And we call it governance portal solution. It's governance around your digital workplace. So it's a SharePoint site with SOPs just for managing Microsoft 365 in general and your broader digital workplace in general as well. So let's see if my link will work here. We literally had a meeting this week about it and made some changes. So I'm really kind of stepping out here because I didn't check this out before the meeting. But let's see. Yep, okay, we've still got it working here. So these advanced SOPs and our governance portal solutions, this actually brings multiple libraries together, multiple standard operating procedures together. It has automated status settings and changes. There's custom properties on it. There's tons of Microsoft lists behind the scenes making this work. There's all sorts of configuration settings in it. So I'm going to try to quickly show you around this a little bit. So if you look at this, you can kind of see here's a list of policies. Scrolling down a little bit further, here's a list of procedures. Here's committees and teams that have to do with this, because we kind of use the hybrid approach to do this. So some people own them, but other people have influence on them. We make sure all of that happens. And here's some of our associated plans to make all of these things happen. If I go into one of these, I think I set this one up that I own, OneDrive retention, storage, and syncing. You can see here's a category. I can drill into this if I want to. Here's a status. We're currently compliant with this one. Here's a better one. I'm not compliant with this one, self-service site and team creation. So let's go into this one. Not compliant means it's monitoring this and says, Jeff, you own this, but too much time has gone by since you've reviewed it. You can see when I open it, we're on version 205.0. We've had a lot of versions of this over the years. Here's how the policy looks like. Here's how it's documented. You can look in here and you can see, hey, please review the document and confirm your review below. So you're out of compliance, Jeff. You need to review this. So I'm going to go ahead and confirm the review. And when the page reloads, you'll see that the confirm review is still there, but it's now in compliance. If I go back to this page, and I think this is actually one of the things that we have a fix out on, it actually did not update the compliance status. It should have, but this is our production one that we're monkeying around with all the time. So that kind of stuff can be integrated directly into the user interface. Going even deeper, we have a whole admin area. You can see all sorts of other information about how to manage these SOPs here. We even have things in here like the full list of private and shared channels in Microsoft Teams. Why do we have something like that? Because those are actually horrible for architecture, right? You don't want to have too many of those, and you certainly don't want a bunch of them that are created nobody knows about and they've fallen into disuse. So behind the scenes, we have automation actually populating lists in here of other things like aged links to external access. So if we give someone access to something that's external to C5, it says, here's the things that look like they've been open for access for too long. It sends email alerts to people. If they don't respond, it goes, I'm going to shut down that access automatically. But they have the option of going, no, leave that open, right? So my marketing library where all these videos are, when that comes up, I always go, nope, leave that open. That's for pretty much public consumption, right? But other things we might want to knuckle down on more quickly. So you can get very, very sophisticated with your SOP libraries depending on what you want to do. This was an application for digital workplace SOPs, but it can be related to anything at all. I mentioned a bunch of other things earlier. I'm not going to play any of these videos, but here's a ton of videos to dive deeper. So if you want to learn more about an issue list and how that might be related to standard operating procedures, quick video there you can play. Again, we've got another webinar we just did that we'll be publishing on that as well. Alerts and approvals, a couple of videos on how to set up alerts and do approvals on things around SOPs. Teams updates. So Teams updates are a great way to implement an SOP. For example, it's a great QA checklist if you're on a manufacturing floor and you need to check the equipment each night before you log out for the night. Well, you can create an update that says, here's the 10 things to check each night. I check those things off. It saves a record of it for me. The SOP might be in your SOP library, but it might link to that updates app, or you can click the link, create an update on demand. Document templates are a great way to have templates around your SOPs. I don't have a video for learning portals, but remember, SOPs are different from learning and education and training, but you still need a place for that learning and education. SharePoint is a great place to host that. Even if you've already got an LMS, oftentimes LMSs are great for heavy lift training content, like compliance content, and you need to integrate testing and all that. But a lot of times you need very quick, rapid training, snippets, videos, pages that people can reference. Document libraries, SharePoint portals can be excellent ways to do that. And of course, Microsoft has another solution called Viva Learning that doesn't replace that. Viva Learning is not the learning database, but it's basically a way of connecting that learning portal to an easier way to access all the content on it. And that's Viva Learning. Included free with Microsoft 365 is the basic version of Viva Learning. If you need something that's more of a lightweight LMS, then you can actually pay for the paid version of Viva Learning, which is a little bit better. Still not a full LMS, but it gets you a little bit further down the road. So a lot of other resources there for you in your journey to create SOPs and all the other things surrounding SOPs that will help you manage them better. So a few closing thoughts for you. First of all, what I showed you today was SharePoint articles and some templates, right? You kind of saw pretty much some out-of-the-box SharePoint stuff around pages and managing columns and some things like that. I overlaid that with some of our own magic that we've created. We call it the C5 Insight SOP Accelerator. We've created a library of routines and add-ons and stuff like that because we do this so often that we can make part of what we do. We don't really have an offering per se. We're not in the licensing business, but because we're consultants and implementers, we kind of have some things that speed us along in that process and help our clients deploy their own SOPs scaled specifically to them. So what I'd suggest to you is if you're a do-it-yourselfer, look, we don't have a black box. We just have smart people who know what they're doing and they've created these things. If you've got good developers and good SharePoint administrators, you can create these on your own. But if you want to work with somebody else to do this, you don't want just the accelerator. What you're looking for is something that works with you. You could see the little vision I gave you, radically different than our governance library, right? Where are you in that continuum? You need to create something that works for your organization. So as you think about all this and think about how do you do better SOPs, think about these qualities of SOPs, right? You want them easily and frequently referenced. If they're hard for people to get to, if they can't easily access them in the flow of their day-to-day business, what good are they really? It's a way to beat people up if they do it wrong, right? Maybe it's okay way to train people initially, but then they forget where things are and they can't get to them easily. You want them open to feedback. You want people to be able to raise issues with them because you want to continuously improve. That's what procedures are in large part for. Once we have a consistent way of doing it, then we can work together to find a better way to consistently do it. You want to monitor them for adoption. You saw that in our governance portal solution, where we can actually monitor and see, are people doing the things we expect them to do? And if they're not, then we can work on other SOPs to help move people along that continuum and include that process for continuous improvement, an issue management list, those kinds of things. So tons of stuff we covered in a short amount of time. Again, following up on a couple of things before I turn it back over to Allison. If you want the slides from today, I'd be delighted to get them to you. The way we do that is a PDF. Ping me via email. There's my email address, and just say, I'd like the slides. Please name the session, because sometimes I get these 2 months later because of a video someone watched on YouTube or something like that. So tell me which session you want the slides for. We'll give them to you in PDF. All those little flyouts for videos and any other resources that were in there, those will be hot. You can click those links and get to the resources. If you like the idea of luck, we've got a couple of books on Amazon.com on the topic. One is called The Luck Principle by me. The other one is called Revenue Engineering by my coworker, Tricia Desso-Cox. And we would love to engage with you in this. We have our big 365 Leadership Conference coming up soon. Allison will fill you in on that. But we do this for a living. If you need help with Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, the Power Platform, and using those tools to help you do business better and connect to people better, such as creating a great SOP library, we'd love to talk to you about it. We work with hundreds of clients, and it's what gets us up in the morning and gets us excited about what we're doing. Allison, I'm going to turn it over to you.